Hey guys, so if you save this from last class, you should have something like this. Now I'm just going to hide the hair and the eyes. You should have layers in your layer area here. The teeth are going to be handled during the rigging process, so we're just going to hide the teeth for now. If they're on, if they're not, great. Hide the eyes, and we're going to create a new layer and just hide the lighting rig for now. So I'll select the lighting rig. We can easily do this in the hypergraph or the outliner. So if you just drag a box over these, you can see them highlighted here. And we'll just drag a box over all the lights, the curve. Let's create a new layer for it. So you can just hit this button here to create a new layer out of the selected objects. And we'll just call it light rig just so we know what it is. We're going to be unwrapping the UVs for this character. So let's change our layout first just to get it to a point where it's easier to work. So I'm going to change this panel to the UV editor by going to Panels. Under Panel, just go to UV Editor. You can zoom in and out and pan in this view. This is a 2D layout, so it's not 3D. And we'll leave this on perspective, and we'll change this to our front view. You can do that easily just by hitting the spacebar. You can see you have all your menus here when you hit spacebar in any panel. And you can right click, and then here you get your orthographic views. So we'll just change this to the front view for now. We're going to be continuously changing this from front view to side view as we work. Okay, so this is basically how we want our layout to be to work on our UV unwrapping. Let's just talk about what UVs are. UVs are in the exact same location as the vertices when we're modeling. If we select the character and right click, you can see we have edge, vertex, and face. You can see here we also have UV option. So if we select vertex, you can see that we have all the points where the edges intersect. We can select the vertices and actually move them and change the model. But if we select UVs, you can see that the UVs are in the exact same place as the vertices, but you can't move them to change the model. They give us the coordinates as to where we're going to place our textures. They basically are a way to allow us to convert a 3D model into a 2D shape so that we can paint on it and reapply it to the character later. And we're going to do that by cutting up our 3D model, laying them out into something that's flat in the UV texture editor, and then we're going to paint them in Photoshop and then bring them back in and apply them to our character. You want to go to the modeling menu set for a moment, and if you go to the top here, you'll see that under UVs, we have these three options. We have cylindrical UV mapping, planar, and spherical. So most of the time we're going to be using planar. There's different ways that you can lay out your UVs, but the most common ways are cylindrical and planar. Actually, planar is the most common way to do it. Some people will do the front of the arm, back of the arm, front of the body, back of the body with planar mapping. And they'll create seams very similar to how the seams on your clothing are. I'm going to do it a very similar way, but instead of doing two texture maps for the arms and stitching them together, we're just going to do one cylindrical map. This is the entire model over here laid out, but it's not laid out properly. Right click over these UVs and we'll select UV. And I'm just going to select all this, and we can use our move tool. So let's just move it over to the side. So everything basically has to be inside this square. So when we're done, we're going to export our UV maps, and it's only going to give us what's inside this square. So we want to make sure all of our UV maps are laid out inside this square. So let's get the arm first. We'll just run through and see how to do it. So we want to select faces. I'm just going to drag a box over the arm, and then we're going to have to refine our selection in a few minutes. So I'm just going to go up to here. I'm going to hold shift down and just deselect some of these. I only want to get this edge loop that goes around the arm, just so it's nice and clean. Okay, so that's good. Alright, so for the arm, like I said before, some people will do the back half of the arm and the front half of the arm separately. But I think it's just a little bit easier and skip some steps to do the whole arm at once. And we're going to use cylindrical mapping because the arm is a cylindrical shape. And as soon as you do that, you'll notice you have this 2D texture placement object. You can see the UVs for the arm here. So what you want to do is click this little T under his armpit, or wherever you see it. It might be on the other side, but for you. But you want to click this little T here, and that'll give you a multi-tool. So we want to get this parallel with the arm. So we want to click the rotation tool, and we're going to rotate this 90 degrees in X. And you can see in your channel box here, it's as you rotate it in X, you see it's getting closer to 90. We want to get it 90 degrees. So I'm going to go 90. And if you happen to make a mistake and click off and it disappears, just go ahead and go back to your UV menu set and go back to cylindrical. Just click on cylindrical again, and you can do it as many times as you want, really. So let's rotate this in Y just to get it parallel with the arm. And again, it's going to be 90 degrees. This is where the elbow is. I can see it over here in my UV texture editor. It's kind of on the right side. I want to get that in the middle over here, because when I go to paint, I don't want to have the paint go off the seam over here. So I'm just going to rotate this again a little bit. I'm going to just rotate it in Y here. You can see it updating in the UV texture editor. I'm just going to rotate it till that elbow is right about in the middle. So now let's go over to our UV texture editor. I'm just going to right click and hit shell. So now we can select this whole arm and we'll just drag it over to the side here. And you can see when you select it, it actually selects it on the model. Also too, when you select the faces, it'll actually select the faces on the model as well. So you can select faces, vertices, shell, and UV. Alright, so what we want to do now is use the unfold tool. Right click and go to UV. Just drag a box over the whole thing so you get all the UVs for the arm. You can see it actually selects it. We want to hold shift down, right click, and use the unfold option. You might see at the bottom it's working away. Alright, so let's just go full screen here for a minute by tapping the spacebar. Now you can see we have some imperfections. Some of our faces are sticking out on this side and missing pieces on this side. And also the elbow is now not in the middle. So if something like this happens, what we can do is go to faces. We can use our lasso tool, and I'm just going to select maybe the first 3 rows here. Hold shift down to deselect some of these faces. Hold shift down and right click and go planar map. And it'll remap just those 3 rows. And then what I'll do is just scale it down a little bit. Then we're going to select the edges. And we can choose move and sew. You can see that it just snaps them right together. So we're going to go through and do that for the whole side of the arm here. If you have a section like this where it has some faces cut out of it, you want to make sure you get the whole perimeter on the inside here. Alright, so once you have all those selected, you can see that it also selects the other side. Just hover over your selection, hold shift down, right click, move and sew, and then you can see it snaps it all together. Alright, so we're going to select all the UVs again, and we're just going to unfold this again. Right? Drag a box over everything, and we'll hold shift down again and unfold. Then this is what we want, something like this. Alright, so before we go any further, there's a couple of tools we want to look at up here. It's nice to turn on shaded UV display. We can click on that, you can see that it turned blue. It just makes it a little easier to see. You can view the grid on and off here. You can toggle on the texture borders of the active mesh. So if we click that, you'll see that there's a border all the way around this. And then we can actually see it on our model as well. You can see the actual border. You can see the seam goes right through here. Alright, so let's save out the arm UVs. So drag a box over your UVs. So we can go to polygons here under UV snapshot. Click on that. And you want to move these to maybe 1,000. By default, I think they're on around 200 and something, but it's too small. It's going to create too small of an image. And we're basically going to be saving this as an image file to bring into Photoshop to paint it. We're going to crank this up to 1,000. And let's choose PNG image, because PNG images have the alpha channel, a transparency channel in them. We want to have transparency so that we can add layers to our texture. Then at the top here, it gives you the path to where it's going to go. So let's hit browse. What I suggest you do is save it to your project file. So you'll want to save this to your source images folder, because that's where Maya is going to reference the images to apply them to the model later. And we'll just call this left arm. We'll save it. So now if you look in that folder, the source images, you'll see a PNG with the UVs for the left arm. So if we double click on that, you can see there it is. And this is the image we're going to bring into Photoshop and paint on. So before I go through and unwrap the rest of the UVs, I just want to actually show you how this works. So you can right click on it, and let's go open with and Photoshop. Okay, so you can kind of see it there. Because the background is transparent, you can't really see it that well, but we're going to add a new layer. So we have it on one layer here. So to add a new layer in Photoshop, we can just go to Layer, New, and Layer. Or you can hit Shift Control N, and that'll work the same way. So let's name this one Flesh Tone. And make sure opacity is at 100% and hit OK. Alright, so make sure you're on your Flesh Tone layer, and let's actually just fill this in. So let's go to our Paint Bucket tool here, or you can hit G on the keyboard. We're just going to click and fill that right in. The layer with our UV image is underneath the flesh tone layer, so we'll just bring that above so we can see it. We can press Z on the keyboard to activate our zoom tool. Then we can click to zoom in, or hold Alt down and click to zoom out. Or you can just hold down left mouse button and drag. Let's just create another layer, and we're going to call this one Paint. So let's actually rename our UV layer. We'll just call it UV, just so we know what it is. This one's flesh tone, and we'll call this one paint. We'll just hit B on our keyboard for the brush tool, and we want to get one of these brushes that has a gradients to it. We'll select this one here. I'm just going to change the color to red, just to demonstrate how this works. So making sure you're on your paint layer, I'm just going to paint the elbow red here, and we're going to turn UVs off, and here we have our texture. And this is the texture we're going to export from Maya. But before I do that, let's just take a quick look. And really, you can paint anything you want on here. The only thing you got to pay attention to is knowing that this is the seam. This bottom part of the arm connects to this top part of the arm. So if you paint off the edge like this, you're going to get a pretty hard seam right on the model. So just keep that in mind. Whatever you do here, you should have the exact same thing happening over here. So to undo that, we can just go to our history here. So before you export this file, you want to make sure that the UVs are turned off in the layer editor here. Just hide the visibility. And we're going to go to Save As. And again, let's save it as a PNG. We're going to name this left arm, instead of calling it left arm UV, we'll call it left arm texture. And making sure it's in your source images. Let's hit save. And just hit OK. That's fine. Let's just minimize Photoshop. Don't close it. We want to keep it open. So now if we hit F8 on our keyboard, just to go back to component mode, let's open up our Hypershade. And let's create a blend. We'll go to the color attribute here. We're going to hit this little checkerboard. And then you get your create render node window that pops up. So what we want to do is create a texture file. We're going to go to File. As soon as we do that, it changes our attribute editor. So it attaches a texture file to the blend shaders color attribute. And then you hit this little yellow folder here, and then you can navigate to the left arm texture that we created and just hit open. And you can drag and drop it right onto your character here. And if you click off, you can see that the texture is right on his elbow there. And that's exactly where we painted it. So of course you'd want to make adjustments to that. But that's just a quick overview of how you can apply the textures to your character. So let's continue to unwrap the UVs for the rest of the character, and we'll paint the textures and apply them. Alright, so we have our right arm unwrapped. Let's just go to shell so we can select it, and we're just going to move it over to the side. Now let's do the left arm. We're going to do it the same way we did the right arm. Let's go to faces, select all the faces. So you want to make sure you get the same border as you did on the other side. UV, and select cylindrical. Then if we just click off here, you can see that you have the arm, and we're just going to go to shell and move that over. I didn't bother rotating the texture placement object this time to get the elbow in the middle, because after we unfolded it, it just put it to the side anyway. So I'm going to use the move and sew technique again. So we'll select the UVs, hold shift down again and unfold. I want to get the elbow in the middle. So again, we can use our lasso tool. So you want to go to faces. Then you want to go to your selection tool and just make sure that you only have the first 3 or 4 rows selected. You can see I have some faces selected here that I don't want. We want to shift, right click, and go planar map. You can see it actually creates a planar map placement object. But that's just temporary, so don't even worry about that. And move it into place. We're going to unfold this again in a few minutes anyways. So you don't have to get too picky, just get it roughly the same size so that we can move and sew. And now when I hover over one of the edges, I can see that we have it oriented the right way, so that edge will sew to this edge. We'll go full screen, and we'll just start selecting our edges now. If it's difficult to see the edges, you can toggle the border edges off here. Hold shift down, right click, and we'll choose move and sew. Right click and choose UVs, drag a box over the whole thing, and again hold down shift, right click, and we'll choose unfold. Alright, so if you get a result like this, I just noticed that this isn't the result I really wanted. The elbow is still down too low here. I want it really in the middle. So you can right click with your UVs all selected. You can right click and use the UV smudge tool just to bring that elbow back up where you want it, and just kind of smudge all these up a little bit higher. You can right click again and choose the smooth UV tool, You can see here we have unfold and relax down below. So if you just hover over unfold, left mouse button click, you can unfold them a little bit. You can also just select a region of UVs. And again, you can right click, go to the smooth UV tool. It was already up, but you can use the relax option to relax them. You could also, if you select a different region here, you can go to UV lattice tool. And this gives you a lattice around the selected UVs. It's just another option and way to revise your UV map. You can see how this works. It just drags a bunch of UVs, and then you can just click off to lock that down. If you end up with a situation like this where you have one face sticking out, it really should be over here. Hold down shift and right click again and do the same thing we did before. We can just hit planar map. You can see here it gives us a little planar map right on that one face, and it'll actually planar map that entire polygon. Then we can just scale that down, move it into place. Right click and select edges. Hold shift down and we'll right click and choose move and sew. Puts it right back where it's supposed to be. The right arm is done. Slide that one over. Now let's do the torso. Right, so again, let's go to faces. For the torso, I want to get the front of the torso and then the back of the torso. So there's going to be a seam that comes down the middle here. So with nothing selected, let's just hold the spacebar down. We'll right click and I'll choose right view. And then we want to select the body, right click and choose faces. Now it's a good idea at this point to toggle on texture borders so you can see the previous borders that you used for the arm. So we want to make sure we don't get any of the faces inside the arm. Now in this area I want to get everything right up to his neck area, and I'm going to make a seam that comes right around to here, and we're going to stitch it right across his trap here. If you accidentally selected some of the faces on the back, you just want to hold shift down and deselect those. So now we can go to the UV menu and select planar map. So it gives us another 3D texture placement object, and you can see that it's planar mapping it sideways. So we want to hit the T here, hit your rotation tool, and let's rotate that in Y. You just want to have it so that it's projecting straight on like this. Let's just move it out of the way and we'll right click, we'll select the UVs. We'll do the same thing as we did before. We'll go to unfold. Alright, so let's have a look at this and see how it unfolded it for us. And that actually looks pretty good. There's no stray faces anywhere, and I'm just going to leave it like that actually. Alright, so now let's move this over and we'll do the back. And you can see that it gave us a border, which is great, so we know where we left off. So let's do a selection on the back. And then just orbit around the model and shift deselect any faces that you might have selected by accident. Go to UV and we'll choose planar. The 3D texture placement object is sideways. Click on the T. And you can translate it out a little bit just so you can see it better. So you just want to make sure that's looking at his back square on. We'll just slide it over a bit just so we can work on it. UVs, select all the UVs. Shift right click and we'll choose unfold. Alright, so it's looking a little bit wonky. Somehow it looks like we might have missed a face here. So let's just select this whole thing. Let's select the faces and take a look at our model. It's not a big deal if we missed one. Oh yes, and I can see we missed one here. Okay, so all we'll do is we'll just planar map that face. We'll just go to planar map. And you can see it planar maps it really big, so we'll just scale it down and we'll move and sew it to the side of the torso. And then hold shift down, move and sew. Alright, so this one came out a little bit wonky, so we're just going to do a few things just to fix it up a little bit. We can try unfolding it a little bit more. And I think that something like that is fine. You just want to get it to a point where it's somewhat symmetrical and it's going to be easy for you to paint on. So what we're going to do is we're going to planar map the front half of the legs, and then we'll planar map the back half of the legs. And we can just continue on with the seam that we have on the torso here. Okay, and we're going to go to UV and we'll choose planar map. And now you can see we have a new seam here. Okay, and we'll select the UVs for this guy. And we'll choose unfold. Alright, so let's take a look at what we have here. If there's any imperfections. I think this is fine. This actually looks pretty good. We're just going to repeat the process for the back of the leg, and then we'll do the same thing for the right leg. And we'll just inspect this one. It actually looks pretty good. And we're just going to unfold the front leg. And I'm just going to give it a check. It looks good. And then we're going to repeat the process for the back leg as well. Alright, and we're going to planar map that selection. And I'm just going to give that a quick check. It looks fine. Alright, so let's start unwrapping the hand. So I'm going to do a planar mapping on the top of the hand, and then on the bottom of the hand, and then we'll unwrap the thumbs separately and move and sew them all together. Now we're going to planar map that. You can see where we have some of these overlapping areas. We're just going to have to straighten those out manually. It's just a matter of going around and relaxing certain sections and manually moving some of them yourself. The best thing to do is just bring your border edges out first, and then just start relaxing some of the inside areas. Alright, so now we want to select the bottom part of the hand. Go to faces, but I want to deselect the thumb. I'm going to do the thumb separately. So we'll just get it the best I can in the top view here, then we'll have to go in and select individual faces. Alright, so that's looking good. Let's planar map that. And that should be good. Let's take a look. Alright, so now let's unwrap the thumb. We're going to do it in two different pieces and then stitch them together. We're going to planar map that. Let's rotate our placement object so that it's pointing directly at it. We can even rotate it a little bit so we can get less overlap. You can see the result in the UV texture editor here. So that's the bottom of the thumb. So we'll go to shell, and now we can easily grab the top of the thumb, select all the faces for that, and we'll planar map that. So we want to keep rotating it so we don't get any overlap like this. We are going to have to relax some of the UVs around the edge. Alright, so let's go through and relax some of the UVs here. We're going to start stitching the thumb to the hand. So we're going to go to our edges, select our edges. We're going to select move and sew. The hands just require a little bit of extra love and attention. And we'll just relax these areas a bit. And whatever you can't get with the relax tool, you'll just have to move manually. Let's attach the top of the thumb to the top of the hand. Get all those edges, and then we'll choose move and sew. And then we're going to stitch the thumbs together, something like that, so we get sort of a butterfly look. I can see I got a couple of overlapping borders here, so what I want to do is just relax these. I'm just going to continue to relax these areas just so I have nice clear edges to grab, and I'll continue sewing and moving these. So that's a pretty good unwrap for us to paint on. Okay, then we're going to repeat the same process for the other hand. So there's some areas that we can go back and finesse a little bit, but generally this would be good to paint on. Alright, so let's do the feet. We'll unwrap the top of the foot and then we'll just do the bottom of the foot. So obviously this is much simpler than the hands. The hands are quite a bit of work because of all the fingers. Alright, so we'll planar map that. And adjust the texture placement. If we right click and go to shell, and then go to the 3D view here, and we can select the bottom of the foot very easily, and we'll planar map that. And that's fine. We could do a little bit of relaxing here if I was going to get into more detail, but I know that these feet are going to be pretty much a solid color, so I'm just going to leave it like that for now. And we got our left foot here. Alright, so all we have left to do now is the face and head. We're just going to slide these out of the way. Alright, so let's get in the side view here. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to make sure I don't select the oral cavity, so we're going to have to actually go in there and deselect the faces for the oral cavity. And also too, I don't want to get the faces for the inside of this eye socket. So we're just going to have to go through and deselect those. So what I'll do is the front of the head first, we'll get the back of the head, and we'll do the neck separately. So let's actually get the neck first. We're going to planar map the back of the neck, the front of the neck, and then have it line up with the ear. And we'll tear it away from the back, from the bottom of the ear up. Okay, so something like that will work out well. Alright, so we're going to planar map this. Alright, and that looks pretty good. Alright, so let's just move that over. Let's actually unwrap this one. We'll use unfold. Alright, so now let's get the face. So we can do this in the side view for sure. So we'll just select all these faces on the head. Use my lasso tool. And we're going to deselect the ear. And I'll deselect the back half of the head as well in a minute. Okay, so let's planar map that. And let's unfold it. And yeah, that looks pretty good. I think what I'll do is I'll just use the lattice tool. Just bring the mouth down a little bit. Just to clear the nose, so when I go to paint the mouth, it's not going to be a big problem. And then I'll just relax some of these UVs. Just want to relax the UVs on the lips a little bit more, just so they're not so tight over here. Alright, so next let's get the ears, and then the back of the head will be easy to select at the end. Then we can go to faces, and we'll just deselect these faces. Alright, so I'm going to split the ear off in two halves, just so we can planar map both sides. Okay, so we have half the ear, we have the front half of the ear. And that's the left ear, so we're going to planar map that. We're just going to rotate that around. Alright, so let's select the UVs and unfold. And that's looking pretty good. Alright, so now it's going to be easy to do the back half. So we'll go to shell and we'll select the back half of the ear. We'll plane and wrap that. Select UVs and we'll unfold. And that's looking pretty good. Okay, so we'll just leave that as is for now. And let's go through and do the other ear. So now we just need to do the back of the head, which should be relatively simple. Select these big chunks. You can see these straggler pieces here that are just sitting there. Those are the pieces for the back of the head. So now we can just planar map this. We'll select the UVs and let's unfold it. And that's looking just fine. We have our entire character laid out. There's one last thing we want to do before we start painting textures. All the different body parts here are different sizes. Now I want to make sure that they're all scaled to the right proportions of the character so that we have even pixel density throughout the entire character. So what I'm going to do now is just temporarily apply a checkerboard pattern to our character, and we're going to scale all the pieces to make sure that the checkerboards are around the same size for each body part. So let's open up our Hypershade. If you don't already have it minimized there, it's under Windows, Rendering Editors, and Hypershade. So let's select the blend that's actually attached to his body, and I think it's this blend 1 here. You can check it by selecting Select Objects with Material. You'll see that he selects, so it's blend 1. We're just going to delete blend 2. We don't really need that one there anymore. Alright, so blend 1, and let's go to the attribute editor, and we'll click on the little checkerboard next to the color attribute, and we're just going to select checkerboard. Now if we hit 6 on our keyboard, you'll see he's got this checkerboard pattern all over him. Alright, so let's minimize that and select our character, and we're just going to go to each one of these. We're just going to select the shell, and then we can scale it. And you can see when I scale the shell, you can see the checkerboard pattern on his body gets smaller as I scale the torso up. The only problem is that we have to have the torso has to remain inside this part of the grid. So what I'm going to do is just go into my checkerboard properties. Let's go back into the Hypershade again. Let's click on our blend. Next to the color attribute where we first made the connection, we'll click on that. And we want to go to Place 2D Texture. And we want to repeat the UV. So right now it's at 4 and 4. So those are the U and the V coordinates. So let's change it to, let's say, 20 and 20. If we want to make these a lot smaller, give him a lot more checkers on his body, and then we can size our pieces up. So I'm actually going to change it to 30, and that should be good. We can go back and make that adjustment again later if you need to. Alright, so now this is kind of hard to see our shells. You can toggle on and off the image, the display image, by clicking here. And actually I'm just going to leave it off right now. If in your file you're having a problem where you have some squares that are really large or some squares that are really small in different parts of the body, you just need to select the shell and you can scale them. If you scale it up, you can see that the checkerboard pattern will get smaller. And if you scale it down, it'll get much larger. But you just want to make sure that the squares are around the same size or as close as possible so that you have an even pixel density on every body part. Our squares are about the same size, so pixel density is going to be consistent throughout, and we're ready for texturing.